We have had one of the biggest B patches for patch 11.24, and there are a ton of changes. It affected the meta a lot, and we are going to go over all the best team comps in the meta right now, along with how to play them, when to play them, and how they fit in the current meta. So every single Friday, I update my website, BunnyMuffins.lol, and I put in every comp that I think is good, rating them from S, A, B, and C tier, and these ratings are pretty much based on a couple of approaches, namely what the very best players in the world are playing, along with some data, and some of my personal interpretation as well. So starting in the S tier, we have Chemtech Urgot. This is like by far like the S plus right now, Chemtech Urgot. It's just like way by far the most played by like all the top players right now. After that, Snipers and Yone, pretty solid comps as well. So the 4 costs are dominating again, no surprise since they nerf all the rerolls. In the A tier, we have Syndicate, Socialite plus random stuff, and then Arcanists. We'll get into more details on these comps later. And then in the B tier, we have Protector Reroll, still really good on certain maps, Samira, Fiora, Innovator, Tristana Reroll, Mutant Malzahar, Twtich Reroll, and Scrap. So out of the B tier, probably like Protector Reroll and Samira are slightly ahead of everything else. And then we have Fiora. So I guess these two would be like the B plus tiers right now. In the C tier, not saying these are horrible, but you'd rather not play them. You can only play them with like super specific augments or in games where you get like a Katarina 2-star very early, for example, for the Katarina Assassin. So we have that comp, we have Misfortune Reroll, Warwick, Trundle, Yordle Veigar, and then like other rerolls at the end there. And again, doesn't mean you have to play the S and A tiers all the time. They are just going to be more consistent in most of your games. So before we get into how to play every single comp, just a quick word from our sponsor. Hey guys, I have a little secret. It's also a free secret at that. It is about the greatest mobile game of all time. And you guys already know what it is, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has over 600 champions now from all types of factions, backgrounds, everything you can imagine. However, what I want to talk with you guys today is a new boss, which is the Hydra. The Hydra's got 6 heads, which means you need to take him down in 6 different ways. First up, we have the Head of Blight, which is all about poison. After that, they have the Head of Torment, which fears your guys. And then they also have the Head of Mischief, which steals all of your buffs. The Head of Wrath does a ton of damage, and the Head of Decay reverses the healing on your own team. And then lastly, the Head of Suffering is the main tank of the Hydra, and you will need to figure out different ways to take down these 6 different heads of the final boss. Oh, and if the boss doesn't excite you enough, we have a super new limited edition champion that is going to be given to every player in the game. It is a Navi Superstar Simple, and between now and January 28th, Simple's limited edition champion will be available to free and old players in Raid. So if you wanted to join and you heard about like the crazy ninja character from before, you guys can get another really good character for free right now by downloading Raid Shadow Legends, or if you already had it from before, re-downloading it and starting to play again. Because I played with Ninja and he is actually like my strongest champion right as soon as I got him. I assume Simple's going to be the same way. And on top of that, it is the holiday season, so Raid's got a bunch of new festivities and events for December. So seriously guys, like never been a better time to join. All you gotta do is hit the link in the description right below, or you can see on my QR code, which is gonna be in one of the corners. And once you do that, you'll get the Epic Champion Aina, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so that you can summon awesome new champions as soon as you get into the game. All this treasure will be waiting for you right here, regardless of whether you're playing on phone or PC, and the rewards will only be available for the next 30 days. It's that easy. I'll see you guys in game. Alright, we are back. We have the Urgot build, and this is again the most played. You want to definitely play for the late game with Jinx, so you really use Urgot in the mid game. Go to the late game, get some legendaries, get Tahm Kench, get Yuumi, get Jinx, and use Tahm Kench to farm items, put the items on Jinx, and then you could use a lot of the components on Jinx as well for scrap components. And that's going to work really well for her if you play a Janna, because she just gets an extra item like that. Bows and swords are definitely preferred for that. For this comp, you definitely want to play kind of standardish. Standard leveling pattern is going to be the best because you are going for a 4-cost carry, and bruisers are a very good start. So like Trundle is a great item carrier. Kog'Maw's pretty good. You could even use Gangplank as well. And yeah, you just try to go for this late game team comp and then add in more legendaries as you go on into the game. You don't have to play this exact board because there are a lot of different augments that affect how many Chemtechs you go. You could go 3 or 5. You could even go 7. I've seen that a couple times, though it's not like that great in my opinion. You could do anywhere from like 2, 4, and 6 bruisers. Again, depends on what you hit. I've even seen people go for 4 twin shot if you get like a twin shot augment. So there's definitely a lot of things you could play around with in this build. You could also just play a lot of random legendaries. If you get like a Victor 2, that's really good as well if you have good items for him. So pretty good options there. The only mandatory item I'd say is like the Runon's Hurricane on Urgot for this build, which is why it is so good right now. Next up, we have the Sniper Jhin build. Snipers can be played with like so many different things, guys, you have no idea. Right now, I have the version with enchanters, but you could play like extra socialites. You could play like the Colossus version with Scion and Galio in the front line. I've seen Jhin being played with bruisers as well. Let's say you're going for an Urgot build from a bruiser start, and then you just hit a Jhin too. You could still play Jhin because you could play like Janna Oriana to get Clockwork and enchanters, and it all works from there. So in terms of how many snipers to play, 2 snipers is the most popular. You just run Jhin and MF. However, you could add in more snipers if you want to go for 4 snipers because there aren't too many assassins right now. I talked about this a little bit last week. The more assassins there are, the less incentive there is to run more snipers. But since a lot of them are being like not played because they got nerfed a bit, you're a little safer to play more than 2 snipers right now. Main tank's going to be Braum. You could also bump it up to 4 Clockwork. You could also play Jhin with Innovators. Jhin works in like so many comps right now that like it's kind of hard to actually just pinpoint him to a specific build. Next up, we have Yone. Yone, he's a little more straightforward. You run him in either Challenger or Academy. We have the Challenger version up right now. Both versions are good. In the last patch, it was definitely the Challenger version that was better. But since Challengers got nerfed a bit, and they changed a bit of the numbers of how Yone works, Academy is also pretty good too. So you could do like 4 Academy, 4 Challenger. We have 6-2 over here, 6 Challenger, 2 Academy. You could even go more Academy if you have Lux items. If you have Academy Spatula, drop that on Fiora. She's a great secondary carry now. Before, we kind of ignored her as a secondary carry, but they buffed Fiora a bunch. There are even comps built around Fiora, so she is definitely a good option moving forward from now on. So that is it for the S tier. Standard leveling again, because again, you're going for a 4-cost carry. And in case you guys didn't know, if you guys were wondering like what standard leveling is, you could go up to the cheat sheets over here on my website, and standard leveling is usually like the green stuff on this little thing here. Pretty much you just reach the level on the left with the stage on the right. So going back, let's go back down to the, I believe we're on the A tier now. We have the Syndicate build. So Syndicates, they did get nerfed quite a bit. It really only works with a Kali, but you could play the next comp with it and like flex between the two pretty easily. So the next comp we have is a Socialite plus random stuff. So if you look at the Syndicate builds, like we have a Taric already and we have a Seraphine. So we already have 2 of the Socialites. It's really easy to pivot between the 2 builds. Also, Fiora builds also use Socialite pretty well. So we'll get into that later when we get to the B tier. But essentially this comp, it's pretty flexible is what I'm trying to say. Whenever you do this start, you don't have to play a Kali if you don't hit her, because you're not going to hit a Kali every game, unfortunately. But if you do, she is really strong. Twisted Fate's a great item holder. He holds Morello really well. He holds Blue Buff really well. He pretty much holds every single item really well. Shaco holds the attack damage items. And yeah, you just put a Kali on the Socialite Hex and go from there. It's pretty decent build. You could also go for 7 Syndicate in the super late game. Also really nice. Next build we have is Socialite plus random. I've seen a lot of like Seraphine carries right now. They go either like Rageblade, Shojin, Morello, or Archangels. All of those are like what people are building on her right now. And essentially you just play Socialite, get a random carry such as like the Akali we saw from before, or Fiora. You could even use Jhin if it's in the back line. Like I've seen so many different combinations of this. Galio uses both attack damage items and tank items, either or work. If you haven't seen like any Clapio videos, it's pretty funny if you guys want to check that out. But he also is perfectly fine with just regular tank items as well. You really only want to do the Clapio build if you have 2-star Galio, which isn't going to happen in a lot of your games, unfortunately. But Seraphine carry, you could add in Oriana. You could run like a lot of enchanters. That's a pretty good tech right now that a lot of people are playing. I've actually seen in Korea, there are so many like 4 enchanter builds. It's actually kind of crazy. But this comp is really hard because again, I don't have like a set carry in there apart from Seraphine, but Seraphine's kind of like a secondary option. You really use Seraphine as an item holder to transfer to like a 2-star legendary later on. So you have to play pretty flexibly with this comp. So I don't recommend this for beginners, but if you want to practice it, this is like the base or like the starting base that you see here. On to the next build, we have the Arcanist Lux build. Lots of different like changes here. So Vex, not as important as before. She's still really great, but you don't prioritize Vex items. Back in the day, like 2 patches ago, we prioritized Vex items when we were playing Arcanist. Now you want to prioritize Lux items because Vex just dies so much quicker. You need Lux to just pop off and kill everything. In the super late game, Victor's also really solid. He's just, with the Shojin, he's going to kill entire teams in like the snap of a hat. So just one quick note, I have this in the A tier right now. It's like between the A and B tier. Not really sure quite where to put it. It's like A minus B plus, but I just rounded up to the A tier just this time. But yeah, Vex items not as important. Always prioritize the Lux items, which is blue buff, JG, and IE. Those are my favorite. But any ability power or damage is going to do great on her. Giant Slayer works great as well if you're facing a lot of high HP tanks. One other thing you may note is that we have 4 Arcanists right now. You could run 4, 6, or 8. They're all really good. I've also seen like Academy Lux work pretty decently, but I do prefer the Vex as the main tank. So now onto the B tier, Protector Reroll. This comp got so many nerfs, it's actually incredible that it's even still playable, but this is the best B tier comp. The only worries is that it works a lot better on good mutant maps. So what are good mutant maps? Like the ones that buff tankiness, the ones that buff Kog'Maw. A lot of it depends on your items. Sometimes you run this with a Malzahar carry. If you have like Elderwood, he's really good with that. It also depends if you are able to get a Rage Blade for Kog'Maw, because Kog'Maw with and without a Rage Blade are 2 vastly different power levels. And it also depends mainly, of course, on how many Castins and Garens that you get. So you don't want to go for Reroll Protector if you don't have a lot of Garens and Castins, but you could still play like Mutants later on, even if you don't get this start. It's just easier to play it like this. But pretty much the augments you want are like the Reroll augments, First Aid's really good, and any Protector Mutant augments will do fine as well. And if you do use like a Garen carry, which is like, I'd say you do that maybe like 20% of the time when you're playing this comp, Academy augments can help as well. But you want to do a reroll. So reroll at level 5, that means you don't level up past level 5 until you hit Garen, Cassidon, and Graves 3-star. Caitlyn's good as well if you get her for free. And you essentially just roll down to 50 gold every single turn because you are able to get the most amount of interest and also like just increase your odds for hitting 3 stars of these champions. I go more into this in like a leveling guide, which I'll probably re-update in like a week or so. So moving on to the next comp, we have Yordle Tristana. Very similar concept. You're doing a reroll as well, except Tristana is a 2-cost unit. So you want to slow roll for Tristana 3-star at level 6 instead of level 5 because level 6 just has better odds of hitting the Tristana 3. And this build is actually really flexible. You don't have to play what's seen on your board here. You don't even have to play like Yordles that we have listed out. A lot of people like drop them later on in the game. You really only care about Tristana and Lulu because honestly, like Poppy kind of sucks. But you just need to play any random tanks are going to be fine in the front line. You could run like Braum Leona, that's going to be pretty good. Right now we have Blitz and the Poppy, it's okay, but it depends on the state of the game and where you're at, because it's pretty hard to get Braum 2 when you're re-rolling at level 6, which is why we have the Blitzcrank and Poppy laid out as well. Also, if you get like a 3-star Blitzcrank, like you might as well just play him. It's not the end of the world there. The best sniper to complement Tristana with is Jhin, because you could also run Orianna for Clockwork. So those 2 units complement each other pretty well. If you get extra attack damage items, throw them on Jhin. If you get extra ability power items, you could play like Misfortune instead of the Jhin if you want to make use of those items. On to the next build, we have Imperial Samira Reroll. There are so many variations of this comp. There is this one we see here, which is the old one. This is 3 Imperial, 4 Challenger, and 2 Clockwork. But there's also another one with Socialite, with Scion plus Imperial plus Socialite to buff Samira. So again, like Socialite's really good this patch. It's especially popular, I believe, in Europe and Korea. NA, it's like starting to pick up in popularity, but it's not being played as much as those 2 other regions. I'm not sure why that is, but that's just a pattern that I noticed when I was looking at people's games. So this version is obviously easier to play because it's really cheap units. So if you're doing reroll, it's going to work a lot better here. Essentially, you want to play this and then pivot into this other build if you can, because this one runs Scion. This one's going to run like a Galio. This one might run like the Seraphine and the Taric. Those are all more expensive units than the 1 and 2 costs that you see here. So you kind of want to hit this. If you don't have many 3-stars here, then you want to level up and hit this other stuff as well. But yeah, pretty interesting comp. Obviously, it's in the B tier, so it's not anything like super good. Probably because they held off on the buffs on Samira a little bit last patch, or in the B patch. So next up, we have Fiora carry. This one's pretty hard to play because you may notice there aren't that many units listed out here. You always put Fiora on the Socialite hex and you want to run 3 Socialite. And then after that, you could put in a lot of enchanters. You could put in Orianna plus Clockwork. Clockwork's really good, so you could put in like a Camille if you want like Challenger and Clockwork. Just note that Challenger isn't necessary on Fiora. So Fiora's ability and damage is based off of her attack damage and ability power, and it's not based off of attack speed. That's why you'll see a lot of Fiora builds not utilizing the Challenger buff. And you know what's interesting? Because of that, you could actually run Built Different with this build and just only use Built Different to buff your Fiora. It's actually like a strategy that quite a few people are doing. If you get the Built Different trait, you play this comp and then just use the health buff on Fiora, because it just is like a free buff for the only unit that matters on your board. You may notice this T and S. What does that stand for? T is just like another random tank. It could be something like a Braum. It could be something, you can run Scion in this instead of running the support unit, which is the S tier, which is like the S letter over here. It's pretty much just means like any random legendary unit, any unit that gives you an extra synergy is going to do fine there. So on to the next build, we have Innovator. Innovator, man, ever since they changed the way the augments work for getting Innovator buffs, a lot less people are playing them, and it's just not as good anymore. But it's kind of like the same flex stuff. You have 2 flex carry slots. Jhin is going to be the preferred option, so you can run like Jhin or an Orianna here for the Clockwork for Zillion. It depends if you have AP or AD items. Seraphine can also be an okay carry, especially if the Socialite Hex is in the back. You could put Seraphine there and then run like a Taric here to get Enchanter, and then run like the same Seraphine items that we saw before. But yeah, this build is a lot weaker. Dragon's pretty good still. That is the 7 Innovator buff, but it's hard to win games with that in my opinion. It's easy to get like 2nd place with it, but it really just depends on how your game went as well. So on to the next build. This is a new build that we have. It's the Twtich Reroll build. You guys may have seen it coming up. Like a lot of people are playing it. It's not that good in my opinion, but like people are playing it a little bit at least. You might see it in a couple of games. I think people are just trying to test it out or trying to perfect it. But essentially, you reroll at level 5 for 1 cost, and in this order: Twitch, Camille, Singe, and then Ezreal. Ezreal's kind of optional, so if you don't hit Ezreal, you could just scrap him and play other stuff instead. But you may have noticed like the synergies work out really well for this build, in terms of like getting a lot of 1 and 2 cost units that just really complement each other really well. So if you ever get the Featherweights augment, this build is really, really good for that. Items for Twitch: Runon's really good. Infinity Edge, of course, since he's an assassin, really good. Last Whisper, great for killing tanks. And then after that, Giant Slayer is also good. Spear of Shojin, even blue buff is pretty decent. And lastly, like Deathblade is also okay as well. Essentially, like you just want to level up and play as many assassins as possible after you get like some semblance of this board. You're not going to hit every one of these units 3-star, so you don't have to play every unit here. For example, you could scrap Warwick and like Ezreal and then just add in 2 other assassins instead. Or if you get like a Chemtech augment, you could like drop the Singed as well if you didn't hit him 3-star. But essentially you just need the Twitch 3, and then you just kind of try to level up and add in random synergies to kind of fit your team comp after that. Onto the next build, we have Mutant Malzahar. This build dropped off quite a bit because Cho'Gath got nerfed a lot. Malzahar's still good though. He's still pretty decent. I really like blue buff on him right now. Jeweled Gauntlet, Hextech Gunblade is really good too. If you're on Elderwood Mutant, which is called like, I think it's Metamorphosis, like Hextech Gunblade is almost required because it's just so good with that mutant buff. So all his items are going to depend on whatever the mutant trait is. Sometimes you don't even go Malzahar carry, you go for like a Kai'Sa or Kog'Maw carry instead in the mid game, and like Kai'Sa in the late game obviously. So it really just depends on how your game's going, what units you're hitting, and also what mutant buff is available at that time. But Cho'Gath is generally the main tank, and then Scion kind of the secondary tank. Mundo doesn't really matter, so you're just using him as a buff for 5 mutants. So on to the next builds, we have the C tier. Bruiser Trundle, like again, all these comps in the C tier, they're not bad. You just need very specific games for them. So if you have like Featherweights 3, go ahead and try Trundle, you know, but like you say you hit a Trundle 2-star really early, like you could try to reroll Trundle, but it's just not as strong as it was before because it got nerfed a bunch. But here are the builds for the C tiers. We have Sniper Misfortune as well. Assassin Katarina, it's still playable. I still see some people do it, but again, you need like a lot of Katarinas to guarantee hitting Katarina 3. Warwick reroll, this one's probably like not really playable in my opinion. Yordle Veigar, I have not seen this work in a very long time. And yeah, that is going to be all the comps right here. In terms of item starts, like, I don't really care what item I start with anymore. Like, I really just go for anything, and there are so many comps right now, you could always fit something into something. But I know it's like, people want a tier list. I prefer personally like defensive items still, so I haven't really changed this ordering in quite a bit. I'm a fan of like the IEJG stuff because it works on a lot of units, but I know some people don't really value IE that much compared to like a Deathblade or like a Last Whisper. So you need to kind of like use your brain to figure out like which items work best for whichever comp you are good at. So keep that in mind whenever you look at like item priorities. Like, just because someone says something is good, you need to know why it's good. So if you are very good at, let's say, an Arcanist build and a Mutant build, you really want to like start like Rod and Tier, you know? But if you're really good at like Protectors, Belt's probably going to be good. If you're playing like the Urgot and Yone stuff, you probably want a bow to start. If you're going like snipers, maybe like a bow or a sword is good. It really just depends what you're trying to play, you know? So of course, the best way to play is like to play flexibly, but not everyone can do that because we don't have time to play like endlessly to know how to do everything in every situation. So that's why like I kind of like doing the tier list, just to help me find some direction in my games. Hopefully it helps you guys as well. But if you guys are interested in seeing more, I update this every Friday, so go ahead and subscribe below if you have not already. And since I'm back from vacation, I am going to be doing a lot more updates to the YouTube channel. I'm going to rehash some of the guides that I had like that were from like a couple sets ago, so definitely look out for that. But that is going to be it from me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you all later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.